This subcommittee has become increasingly concerned with so-called sanctuary policies in which local or state law enforcement simply refuses to transfer illegal aliens who are already in their custody to federal authorities for deportation, or at the very least notify federal authorities about a criminal's release. Instead, these jurisdictions release these criminals back into our communities, often with devastating consequences. The doctrine of nullification, first propounded by John C. Calhoun, holds that local or state governments may simply ignore federal laws that they disagree with. This doctrine, fatal to a federal republic, was thought to have died with the Confederacy. These nullification or sanctuary jurisdictions now extend to 11 states, coincidentally the same number as the old Confederacy. Fairfax County has become an epicenter of this movement. Its Commonwealth's attorney boasted that he, quote, will make charging and plea decisions that limit or avoid immigration consequences. He wrote, quote, if two people commit the same crime but only one's punishment includes deportation, that's a perversion of justice, end quote. Thus, an illegal alien would be charged with a lesser crime than an American citizen in order to protect that illegal alien from deportation. That is the true perversion of equal justice under law and has now prompted an investigation by the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. Fairfax County Sheriff takes a similar position that her office, quote, will not detain an individual based on an informal request or detainer. Instead of safely allowing ICE to return that criminal to his own country, as federal law requires, she prefers to release him back onto her community's streets. Ironically, both claim this is to foster trust between residents and law enforcement. This begs the obvious question, can residents trust law enforcement to protect them and their families? A long list of violent crimes perpetrated by criminal illegal aliens that these officials had in their custody and refused to prosecute and refused to remove from their communities answers this question with poignancy. The most recent case is the tragic and entirely preventable murder of Stephanie Minter, the young lady stabbed to death as she waited for a bus. Her accused murderer is Abdul Jola, illegally present in the United States. Since 2022, Jola's criminal history has included trespass, disorderly conduct, drug possession, theft, larceny, and repeated arrest for malicious wounding. Between January of 2023 and February of 2026, he had been arrested at least 18 times. Commonwealth's attorney Toscano dismissed almost all of these charges. At least once, Sheriff Kincaid, instead of informing ICE that she was in custody so that he could be deported, and despite a detainer request from DHS to do so, deliberately released him back onto Fairfax County streets. Last year, the Fairfax County Police Department became so alarmed at these decisions that they took the extraordinary step of warning Descanso that Jola had, quote, stabbed multiple people, sexually assaulted at least one woman, and committed numerous other criminal offenses. The police then issued this grim prophecy. It is not a question of if, but rather when he will maliciously wound, or worse, again. Well, the when came on February 23rd. That's the day this monster is accused of hacking Stephanie Minter to death. She was 41 years old. She leaves behind a grieving family. Now, Sheriff Kincaid says she doesn't have the budget to call ICE to pick up such criminals before she releases them back onto the streets. Well, that begs the question, how much does a phone call to ICE cost? And what was the cost to the Minter family of not making that call? Nor is this an isolated incident. There's a growing list of other criminal illegal aliens who these authorities had in custody and released back onto the streets instead of making a simple phone call to ICE to pick this person up. It includes illegal aliens who had their charges reduced or even dropped altogether, despite crimes ranging from child sex offenses to murder. Of the 7 homicides in Fairfax County last year, 3 were committed by illegal aliens who could have been deported before they committed these crimes. Mr. Descanso's empty claim to be the safest city of its size in the country rings hollow against this reality. Just as Stephanie Minter's murder wasn't an isolated event in Fairfax County, Neither is Fairfax County an isolated example in our country. This utter dereliction of duty is rampant across jurisdictions the Democrats control, including my state of California, where the Tulare sheriff recently testified that fully half of the crimes he's dealing with involve illegal aliens. Yet state law forbids him from cooperating with ICE because the Democrats don't want to enforce our immigration laws, even against criminals in custody. To most Americans, these policies seem reckless, dangerous, crazy, wanton, and cruel. Today, this subcommittee seeks to understand how elected officials entrusted with the sacred responsibility to protect innocent and law-abiding residents would deliberately act in this manner. We will soon hear their rationale. We'll hear from witnesses the Democrats have chosen in support of these policies. And we'll also hear from the former Attorney General of Virginia and the president of Virginians for Safe Communities, who take a very different view. And finally, we'll hear from Stephanie's mother, who has bravely come here today to provide a victim's statement of the toll these policies have taken on her family, and who offers a grim warning to all Americans of what could happen to them at any time where these dangerous policies are practiced. I'll now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Descano, in the case of Mr. Rodriguez, whose charges you dropped in the case of the 4-year-old who was attacked in her own bedroom, I understand he was later taken into custody by ICE and deported. I'm just curious, did you notify ICE of that release so that they could deport him, or was it the little girl's mother who had to call ICE to get him out of your community?
Sir, we did not call ICE.
The mother had to call to get him out of your community. Mr. Mayoris, we keep hearing from Sheriff Kincaid, among others, that they'd be happy to respond to a federal judicial warrant to honor a detainer request. Well, is a federal judicial warrant possible to obtain in a state crime?
No, it's not, and they know this.
And if deportation is a civil matter, how does one get a federal judicial warrant?
You can. Again, they know this.
So they're basically lying to the public. They're counting on the public not understanding that what they're asking for is legally impossible.
It's legally impossible, yes, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Kennedy, do you find it odd that the Democrats are blaming ICE for not deporting this particular suspect who's accused of murdering Stephanie Minter? And yet at the same time, they refuse to notify ICE so they can deport such suspects, and they refuse to fund ICE so that they can deport such suspects.
I do find it odd, but I'm actually going to extend agreement to the Democratic side, because I believe that Mr. Jallow should never have been deported whatsoever. He should have spent the rest of his natural life before Stephanie Minter's death in the Virginia Department of Corrections. And short of that, he should have been deported to Sierra Leone after he served his sentence. None of that came about. He was never sent to prison. Mr. Descano said that he obtained a sentence for him for multiple years. He never left Fairfax County. He never was sentenced to prison. He spent time in the jail and was released because of good time credits. Mr. Jallow should have spent the rest of his life in prison and then been deported.
Should have to go on. We keep hearing these sanctuary policies enhance public safety. What have your studies shown?
That these aren't the same thing. That every single person who is injured or is a victim of a property crime, a person crime, let alone a homicide, was a completely preventable homicide, was a completely preventable crime. And so these are all excess things that didn't have to happen. And when it comes to repeat offenders, I identify in my testimony 25 incidents, 25, and half of them are unknown to the rest of the public, where escalating violence occurred, escalating here.
That's including 3 out of 7 homicides in Fairfax County. The Center for Immigration Studies looked at the escape documentation from states seeking reimbursement for illegal aliens held in their state prisons. They found that illegal aliens are typically at least 3 times as likely to be incarcerated than citizens or lawfully present aliens. Mr. Mayoris, Democrats say this is all necessary to get illegal immigrants to report crimes. But in fact, if an alien is the witness to or a victim of a crime, don't they qualify for a U visa to remain in this country under current law?
Well, I don't think it builds community trust either when you see a catch and release program being instituted by this Commonwealth's Attorney's Office. That does not build trust for you to come forward to testify.
Someone's not going to report a crime if they knew that criminal is going to be back on the streets later that afternoon to take vengeance.
That is correct. And so what you have seen is a revolving door. Every policy Mr. Descano advocates for, policies he supported in the General Assembly, is to allow a revolving door, changing our bond policies in Virginia, and his own personal policies that they have in Virginia is to release criminals back into the community time and time again. And we know from his official policy that he takes in factor their immigration status as well.
And ironically, when these criminals are released back into the community, they tend to prey on the illegal immigrant community where they've come from, do they not?
No question.
In fact, we had just a case recently where a legal immigrant from Bangladesh had her head bashed in by an illegal Haitian national with a long rap sheet who'd been allowed to remain in this country under the TPS program. You mentioned that Governor Spanberger is expected to sign legislation that would forbid cooperation with ICE. I assume that would forbid notifying ICE if and when Stephanie Minter's killer is released.
Correct. He will be presumably in the Virginia Department of Corrections, and under a current executive order, as we noted, there's no requirement of a judicial warrant. They won't notify ICE, and so despite all of her public pronouncements,
Yes. Ms. Minter, Sheriff Kincaid said that she didn't have it in her budget to make a phone call to ICE to honor a detainer. Does that make you feel more safe? What's your response to Sheriff Kincaid?
I think I'm just going to start keeping a list and calling ICE myself.